I'm very excited to share with you my thoughts and also my journey through this Metaverse development and how I started. But I will also add some pioneers, and I will also talk about a few moments that I observed that made me think, okay, something interesting beyond my own art or art in general is happening here. So I'm an artist, I'm working with digital tools. I create extensions of buildings, for example, also for the Francisco Carolinum here, I made one. And I'm really interested in merging the digital world with the physical world. So what things are similar, what is different, and what are the possibilities of it all? So in the beginning, maybe, what is the metaverse? In science fiction, you would say it's a hypothetical iteration of the internet as a single, universal, and immersive virtual world. So I put Morpheus next to it with the red and the blue pill from the Matrix. And he has those two pills, and he says, either you stay in the Matrix or you learn the truth. And the truth is that machines took over the world and keep humans as batteries. So that's the science fiction thing about the metaverse, at least the way I understand it. But what we're talking about today, and why also maybe Facebook rebranded to Meta, is rather like a network of 3D virtual worlds, and it's more focused on social connection. So we are not that far in the evolution of the evil machines. I think the word metaverse also is quite a marketing term, so I don't treat it as serious research in my presentation, but rather as, I don't know, a summary of what companies think the future is, also what they use to raise money, and how my own art that is related to the physical and the digital fits into it. I want to start with a bit of the, let's say, the corporate history or the mainstream history of Metaverse. So, as I said, the Matrix. In the background, you can see many ancient Smiths that Neo on the left-hand side is fighting against. And of course, Hollywood always has a narrative because they have a story to tell. They have to keep the tension, and really building something is maybe not the biggest interest in this case. Other than Facebook, and Zuckerberg bought Oculus in 2016, and this was this image, I don't know if you remember it, but when I saw it, it was really shocking in a way, because the images, if you remember the Matrix where they keep the humans, it's really very similar in a way. And then also Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One feeds into this narrative of, okay, I don't know, corporates or AI will take over and humans will disappear or something. So that was 2018, based on a book from 2011. And then in August, Mike posted a selfie from the real project that Facebook is working on, which shows himself in a quite weird style, and not that detailed version of some sites in the background. The internet made a lot of fun of him, and he also later said, no, it's not going to look like that, it will be better. So, this is what corporate or mainstream narratives tell us about metaverse and those evolutions. And what I'm asking you today from you is to slow down a little bit, like to open the view and also to have a look at the smaller artist projects or what's happening in the blockchain space, because I personally think that it's way more interesting and way more on point or has more potential than like very big tech in the beginning. And maybe one important step there was Animal Crossing New Horizons. I mean, it's also mainstream, but it's published as a game, so it doesn't really present itself as a metaverse. But I remember when we were in the pandemic and you couldn't go out, playing on the little Nintendo in this relaxed environment was really really chilled and made you feel better in a way. So what you do there is you play a little and you go fishing. There's also some kind of stock exchange, which is maybe interesting for the NFT fans. But it comes way softer, I think. And in the background, you can also see images, so you could also upload your own stuff and have it there. And also, institutions had spaces in this new world. How did it all start for me? Maybe that's a quite different point of departure. What you can see here is the Bertil chair from IKEA. And it's a very special chair because this one was the first that was created in 3D by IKEA. In 2006, so that's 16 years ago. And I think, here you can see how those two worlds merge. I mean, as you can see, I'm not talking about social space here, but in a way I do, because it was in the IKEA catalog. Most people didn't notice. And so you skip through virtual worlds. By now, by the way, about 80%, or no, that was 5 years ago when I found this article, 80% in the IKEA catalog was rendered. So you browse through the IKEA catalog and think about your new home, but what you're really seeing is digital spaces. They do it because they want to save time, and also if they have some specific furniture for Brazil or wherever else. Brazil is very far from Sweden, so that's a good example, and they don't have to take that to Sweden to take a photo. They don't have to run photo studios around all the world, so they save a lot of money, energy, environment, everything. And for me, that was like, definitely the digital world is merging with the physical one. You buy a chair that is actually a rendering. That's 2006, and I skipped one thing. This is how I really got started. So I grew up in the countryside, and with my friends, we were playing Counter-Strike quite often. And that's how I really got into games. So I started building my own maps, because in those games, the narrative is quite equal all the time. So you have to kill your enemies, which is maybe interesting for gameplay and for competition, but I was a bit bored by it. And so the first steps that I did on the left-hand side, you can see there's a kitchen. So that's not a usual map that you would find in such a game, but there was a super active modding scene that took things from the game and changed it. So you, could, for example, play in a kitchen. And what you can see on the right-hand side is a chicken mod. So you could also turn all the players into chickens. And that's what I really found funny and interesting. So in those worlds, you aren't like in the physical world, what you want to be or to look like. You can change everything you want, because you can oftentimes at least change the source code. Back then, we did LAN parties instead of the internet. But later on, of course, it developed into massive online player games, also like World of Warcraft, where still a lot of people are playing. So I would say also here the metaverse is already there. Moving to the world of art, maybe. So Herbert W. Franke, who also had a solo show right here this year, I think, and sadly passed in the last month. He said that because Homo sapiens has the capacity of linguistic expression, it has created parallel worlds for themselves and others. They are not simply an invention of Mark Zuckerberg, even if it seems that way today. So also, he says that it's not what maybe corporate tries to make as a product right now, but this kind of developing new worlds is something that people always did. And what I would say is that, now with the help of technology, you can better communicate and also experience them. So this is an image from his project in Z Galaxy in 2008, which also is quite a long time ago. And so the real pioneer, I guess, is Herbert. And then this is a video work by Greek artist Andreas Angelidakis. It's called Building an Electronic Ruin from 2011. And this one was in Second Life, which was probably the first big Metaverse-ish hype back then. And I like this video really a lot because he says that in these digital worlds, everything is different, so there's no gravity, there's no fire, and so on. And also, he incorporates this in his work. So what he builds is already a ruin, because those buildings, they don't really age. You can't see if, I don't know, if a column like this collapses. It will always stay the same as long as the software is running. I mean, you can see the quality is a bit old school for today, but because buildings don't age, they are already ruins when you are building them. And of course, that also relates to Second Life, because nobody is really talking about it anymore. And then in 2012, so 1 year later, I started my first project in the space. And that was Float Gallery, which I started in the project space of Hochschule für Gestaltung in Offenbach, where I rebuilt the physical space and showed digital artists' work there. In the beginning, I didn't show my own work, but I invited others. So one work, for example, which you can see, there's on a column on the right-hand side and also on the left-hand side, that's by Anthony Antonellis, and it's a Windows 95 screensaver that he put on a pedestal in a digital museum, kind of. So, yeah, he's using this, I don't know, let's say cultural technique and style of the white cube in order to show those objects. And yeah, it's a bit like putting a pissoir on a pedestal and making it art. In this way, it's also playing with this kind of ideas. I use software that is a bit like architectural visualization, or also games, in order to create these kind of worlds. And this one, what you can see is a video of the virtual reality version, and it was published on Steam. And already back then, more than 20,000 people downloaded it, which is immense for such a I don't know, student project even. So also the gaming world is super dynamic, I guess, and interested in new things. In the comment section of Steam, were super interesting discussions like, what is contemporary art? Is this cool because in this and that game the background looks better or something? And so, yeah, I think in a way I succeeded in starting a discussion about what digital spaces can do. Another project by another artist or kind of filmmaker, Spike Jonze's Her movie, where he is playing a game, for example, with this little character, and they are talking. What you can't see in the image is that there's a voice that is an AI that he's talking to, and they really become friends, and he's in love with her. And so, yeah, this merge of talking to artificial intelligence, maybe having something in a space that is not really happening physically, but only digital, that's what I'm really super interested in, because, yeah, it has a lot of possibilities and new ways of viewing the world. In 2013, another anecdote happened, which was that Danish television accidentally took a photo from a computer game for reporting on the war in Syria. And I think it also shows how games and the whole digital world and also Metaverse technology is also linked to war and to military, because already in the beginning they were super supportive for training their soldiers. There's a very good work by Haroun Farokhi also that is called Serious Games, I think, where you can see how soldiers are trained in games. So yeah, maybe also not forget about the roots of all these technologies. In 2017 then, I was invited by NRW Forum in Düsseldorf to create a virtual reality lounge and an exhibition. And what I came up with was this building that is kind of hovering over the space. It's made of digital material, which reflects 100%. So you don't really see the object, but you only see the reflection of what is around it. And the visitors were walking into the space. Then they got virtual reality glasses, and they found, in VR, they found themselves in the same space, and then were able to walk around this building and experience the work of, I think, 5 other artists that created them for this exhibition. And what you can also see here is that it's geolocated, so it's not only a digital object that you can put everywhere, but it really fits to this very space. I think the architecture is generative and dynamic. It relates a bit to Friedrich Kissler's idea of the endless house, where he also tried to make a more dynamic architecture, but like 50 years ago or something. And I think now you can really see how that works in a digital space, because unlike physical exhibitions, you can generate everything new. Actually, it's created new every frame, like 60 times a second, but also in the long run, you can change the building according to the exhibition and not the other way around. And then I think that's the first work that I showed in an institution. It's Frankfurter Kunstverein and called wetware. So I created this liquid metal that crashes through the ceiling of the exhibition space. And my question here is whether humans will first control material, like chrome in this case, in a way that is, I don't know, disconnected from physics maybe. So a bit like Terminator, because Terminator also has this capability to change shape and everything. Or is the simulation first as good as in the Matrix, so that you can simulate this material, but it's not worth doing it in the physical world. You're just wearing a headset where it automatically happens, and you can't even tell it apart from physical reality. The piece is called wetware. So in tech vocabulary, there's hardware, which is the physical computer, software, which is what people are coding, and wetware would be the human part, like the brain, which is made of liquid. And what I also tried to focus on in this work is that the screen is coming closer and closer to your brain or to your eyes. So in the beginning, there was cinema, you watch the movie with others, then there's television, there are fewer people around you, and the screen is a bit smaller. On your phone, you're usually alone, and in VR, you don't even see anything around you anymore. And then, of course, the next step is the cable straight to the brain, which you can already see in the installation shots. So this was the physical view of the exhibition, and here you can see virtual reality headset in the very same space again, and I painted a wall similar to the cracks that crashed through the ceilings. And what you can see here on the bottom is kind of a console which outputs information about the software. As a developer, you use that very often to know what your software is doing. So you make little kind of waypoints that tell you what's happening. So here you can see that she's on the first floor, for example. Another interesting work that I didn't see myself, unfortunately, by Jordan Wolfson, which is called Real Violence. And here you can see the artist in virtual reality, usually. You can see the artist beating someone to death. So that's raised a big discussion about the empathy machine. They called it because the idea is, or was, that because it's so immersive and so convincing, you can really raise empathy in people if you use virtual reality. I only found this bad image on the internet. I don't know if I just didn't look close enough, but maybe it's also because they don't want to give away too much of the experience. Because that's something that I also noticed, that when you're talking about VR or you're showing images, you can never really transmit the real experience, because it's just not the same when you look at it on a screen. And it looks way more boring when it's not interactive and you can't look around and you don't have this feeling of depth. My next project was for Royce & Birch in Zurich. It was called Cube, or it is called Cube. And that's a building that I designed for the abstract. So you can see there's nothing in the environment except for this huge lake or something. Also here, there were multiple artists invited, and it's a dynamic building, and I tried to play with the clouds around the different spaces. Because in the digital, you can also handle nature in a different way. Here's one work that you also could theoretically see from the outside. It's by Chiara Passa. It's very abstract work, and I find it super interesting how this abstract space relates to the abstract world. That is, both in a way based on mathematics, but also so detailed that it doesn't really look like mathematics anymore. And my own work in this exhibition was called Malibu, because of the colors. And it's a dynamic space with a physics simulation. So as an artist, you can choose whether you want to add gravity to your space or if you don't want to, and how all the dynamics in it work. But through it, I guess, through the movement and the relation to physics, it's becoming a bit more alive than if it weren't there. The colors, I use very strong colors, by the way, because they are also used in color coding when you develop. You can see that the one object is very different from the other one, and you see that at first sight. And in developing, that's very important. And also for AI, it's easier to recognize different objects if they have a very different color. And this is in 2019. Oh. Just a second. I will turn on the sound from my laptop. Let's see.
Vicious flames engulfed the 850-year-old masterpiece of Gothic architecture.
So on the big screen you can see a game again, Assassin's Creed. And on the right-hand side, you can see live television from the burning Cathedral Notre Dame in Paris, which was a horrible event, but in the game, it's still alive or still standing. And the idea was that maybe this digital model that they took in great detail could help rebuilding the physical Notre Dame. In 2020, I launched an exhibition at Königgalerie in Berlin. It was curated by Annika Meyer and Johann König. That was really in the beginning of the pandemic that we released it. So when the lockdown started, this one came out as an app. It's also geolocated. And the question that I also asked myself back then is, how can you experience virtual reality? I was invited for a group show normally. And also then you have 2 headsets, maybe you have 5 headsets. But in order to make everyone look at it, it made more sense to release it as an app. And then everybody can use their phones to walk through it. And that's what we also did. Here's some footage of the game, or like a trailer. And in April 2020, this was, it was super interesting because you could do it at home. And also I played with the possibilities of the digital space. So for example, those sculptures you can see below, you can run them over, which isn't possible in a physical exhibition. So if you throw over, I don't know, a Greek sculpture, it will be destroyed and people will get very angry. But in the digital space, you can work with these kind of things. You can make fun of it. They also will rebuild after a certain amount of seconds. And so I try to highlight those differences to the classic art world, which is also the case with the colors, for example, because usually you would have very neutral and white walls. And in my games, often they are very playful. There's also the link to my app called Real World Art. So if you want to have a try yourself in these worlds, you can download the app that I noted here. Part of this exhibition was a piece that I painted in virtual reality, like the ones you saw before also. And I also made physical pieces of them. And here the question is, which one is real? I mean, of course, they are both real. I mean, the digital file is also real, but only the one on the right-hand side is physical. So there's this creation that happens in the digital space, and that is then transformed to the physical space, which is special, I think, about this series. And I think, it also plays with how usually the art world is working. Because I think, I don't know, sculptures of big bunnies or something are also 3D files in the first place. And so I try to shift the focus on those digital works as well, which goes along with, I don't know, people spending a lot of time in games, and people who don't understand it ask them, what are you doing there all the time? But they really become dynamic and alive worlds by themselves, I guess. So from these works, I made a series out of 100 NFTs. 25 of them will be produced physical, and they are minted on Ethereum. And if you have a digital 3D version of it, you can also use them in different metaverses, for example, Decentraland, or if you have an artifact spaceport or something, you can put them there because there's this interoperability between different platforms. But they have other features, so I play with this materiality. I ask, what's the material like? What are those algorithms that make something like shiny or not shiny, or melting, like in this example, or bouncy? So in the physical world, you know that you can break wood and you can burn it, and you can build a house out of it. But in the digital, yeah, it's a bit different, and I'm wondering what the properties of those digital materials are. In a way, this project is also an antithesis to generative art. So if you have an algorithm that alters for every piece, it's a very automatic process. But those ones, they are really related to my unique movement. So I can make only one at a time. I have to try very often to get a great shape. And it really depends on my human movement. For example, if you try to paint in VR, it's very hard to make a straight line. You will always have this kind of bending of your body in it. And yeah, working with those two conditions is very powerful, I think. Here another example. So Travis Scott made a concert in Fortnite, and it had more than 12 million visitors. Also, Serpentine Gallery, by the way, experimented with exhibitions in Fortnite. And probably, or at least many people say that maybe Fortnite is the most closest thing to metaverses, which would also fit with Epic Games, the company behind it, being really forward on metaverse developments. In a way, maybe there's one that also has some properties that are very powerful and go further than Fortnite. So what I did here is I moved a digital work of mine, which I created for High Snobiety collaboration in 2021. I moved this work to Microsoft Flight Simulator. So the painting with the bubbles is geolocated artwork again, and it's in the skyline of Berlin. So I thought, yeah, why not using the TV tower as a landmark in order to locate my work? And then, if you want to watch it, what's the best way to do it? Of course, you need a plane because it's huge. And Microsoft Flight Simulator, I don't know if anybody here is playing it, but it has a really great model of the world. So Berlin is quite well replicated, at least from that distance. It almost looks like a movie, I think, and you can really see, I don't know, my studio is over there, for example, and I'm sure you will recognize places that you already know. And yeah, I found it really interesting to put my work in there because you can also simulate like weather, and I think here you can really see how a digital twin of the world is emerging. And also the people who play Flight Simulator are very into it, so you could also enable like radio and talk with other people on the phone, and yeah, I don't know, talk to the tower to tell them when you land your plane and stuff like that. So that is super convincing, and I'm happy to have my work in there. Oh, I mean, I would be happy to have my work in there. This is made with a developer toolkit, so it's running only on my machine at the moment, and I applied for being allowed to publish it on the Microsoft Flight Simulator, so you can buy it as an extension, but I didn't hear back from them yet. I hope I will, and if you think about it, it would be a great decision because it would turn this software into a huge outdoor museum in a way. So I hope I can provide this experience soon. Another metaverse is Decentraland, where based on the model that I created for the exhibition earlier, I created also with Johan and Annika, I created a digital gallery space, which is based on the architecture by Werner Düttmann and later Arno Brandlhuber. And it's a bit altered, and I also made these sculptures that you can see on this picture. So it's a line that goes around the bell tower of the former church. Decentraland has around 90,000 parcels, and a lot of people are investing in it and hope that it becomes something like a new world in the time of Metaverse or something. We had a very kind landlord that offered us this plot, and so I deployed Königgalerie there. This is a video of the opening, and you can see many net art legends over there. For example, La Turbo Avedon, Damiansky is there. I think Jonas might be Jonas Lund, I hope, who has a solo exhibition here right now. And this was really a fun evening because so many people were coming, and also like people, I don't know, I never met La Turbo Avedon. They are also an avatar that only live in the digital space anyway, as far as I know. But so it's the perfect vernissage for the digital world, maybe. There was a bit of a challenge, though. So in order to get to the rooftop party, you had to master this kind of gamey sculpture that I built in there. Oh, this is a Zach Lieberman piece. I love that a lot. Oh. Afterwards, my work, How Did We Get Here, at Hamburger Kunsthalle. So again, I used the exhibition space to extend, and this is a very modern building, so it's very rectangular and very straightforward, by Oswald Matthias Ungers, but I don't know, countered this kind of straight lines by my very round, destructive forces. And there's a little character that I also used in the game for König before, and he or they also walk up this line and experience the new space. There's also, if the character is up there on the end of the line and you look from him from behind, it looks a bit like the renderer above the mist, which is also in the collection of the museum. And I'm very happy that my piece actually became the first NFT in their collection as well. And I minted it on Ethereum. You can see it on OpenSea. And it's also geolocated. So I hope that software in the future will be able to just take the NFT and display it in this location. I don't know if software works this way. I think theoretically it would already be possible that you link your wallet to Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the NFTs you have in there are then places you can fly to, or something like that. At least that's how I imagine the future of NFTs and metaverses. In this exhibition, it's called How Did We Get Here? The relation to history for me was very important. So you can see works by Sam Francis, for example. Gerhard Richter is around there. That's from their collection. And what also was on display in the museum, this is now a photography, before it was a rendering. On display, there was also one of the Surprisingly series. So the blue one is here in the background. And in virtual reality, that you viewed also in the museum, you could see that when you walk up the stairs to this side of the museum, you couldn't see the digital piece in VR in the very same location where the physical one was. And this connection is very important to me, and I think it highlights how the physical art world is extended into the digital. Here's also a piece by Lucio Fontana, who I find very inspiring, and he also cut his canvases, and I'm not an expert in his work, to be honest, but he talks about how this cut opens a new world that is more imaginary for him, I think. And now 60 years later or something, with virtual reality, you can visit this world together with other people and in this immersive way. And what you can also see is that this Sam Francis painting on the right is also very well visible in the digital world.
Auch Kunstgalerien fangen an, sich ins Digitale zu verlagern. Auf der Baustelle neben der neuen Nationalgalerie in Berlin sehen Sie erstmal nichts. Oder doch? Dieser rosa fluffige Flauschball ist die virtuelle Kunstgalerie New Float von Digitalkünstler Manuel Rossner. Um seine Galerie zu sehen und zu betreten, muss man sich die zugehörige App aufs Handy runterladen. Man schlüpft in die Rolle eines Michelin-artigen Männchens und erkundet auf dem Handy die Galerie.
Yeah, so this was a project in early 2022, so this year. And I started to get an NFT collection, so I started collecting first the work of artists that I've been working with, and then I expanded a bit, which is super cool. And I wanted to create a space for it, and then in Berlin I noticed this empty plot next to the Neue Nationalgalerie. It's a construction site right now, as you saw in the video, for the Museum of the 20th century. So 450 million spent for, I don't know, showing a collection again. And I thought, okay, what can I as an artist do with this? Because I have all the experience from building spaces, and so I created my own next to it. You can view it in the app that I created and on the internet in videos from the outside. There's also a website for it, and I made it look really like an institution. And then I raised this question of what are institutions doing in the digital. So of course, the examples that I showed, like for example, Alfred Weidinger here, Alain Bieber in Düsseldorf, and Hamburger Kunsthalle, the curators, they are very into it and experiment with it. But I think at large, not so many things are happening, and there's a lot of more possibilities, at least if you're talking about these sizes of budgets as well. And I think I succeeded. So for example, there was good media coverage in the social media realm. It also raised some discussions about how you can show work if you collect it, and what is an NFT collector even. And yeah, I'm really interested in how those possibilities of being a collector emerge and continue. In July this year, I opened an exhibition in Baden-Baden where I made another of those spatial paintings. It's destroying the Kunsthalle a bit because, yeah, that's how I interfere with architecture. In the process of creating this work, I also noticed that I have to decide what I bring into the digital world. I think we all have, because in the physical world, there's of course problems that we might not, or might view in a different way in the digital. So while creating the 3D model, I noticed this kind of plate with the donors of the Kunsthalle. It was opened in 1909 or something, so before the First World War even. And the people on this plate had very different ideas. And I was wondering, do I want those donors in the digital world? It's a very difficult question. So in this case, I didn't mount a plate, but I put it on the floor in order to have a discussion about it again, because I also don't think that I can decide that as an artist. So for example, I don't know, there were locals that, I don't know, went to the global south and supported apartheid and things like that. And I was wondering, do we have to really repeat these kind of ideas in a way by publishing the people? But yeah, that's an open question, I guess. In these views, you can also see two other public art objects that are owned by the Kunsthalle and installed there. So I related the work to Richard Serra, which you can see here. And he has these very sharp plates inside the landscape. And I think it's about also about mastering the material of the industrial age. So really sharp metal plates that are very on point when it comes to production. And they age also in their environment. And I really like to make this contrast of my own work, which crashes the exhibition space itself. It's very dynamic. I mean, the way I'm drawing these lines, It's also not so precise, and it's ephemeral and dynamic. I think that also represents our time in a way, with all the startup culture, and I think philosopher Byung-Chul Han called it the signature of the present, which he refers to as the aesthetics of these days. So, like, the iPhone is perfectly round, and everything seems to work all the time. There's no patina, nothing. And I try to pick this up, but also to criticize it, of course. That's also maybe in my physical productions. When you really have to produce these things, it's a very different story, and also puts pressure on people, I think, in terms of being as good as the digital, which you can never be, at least in some context. Of course, I also know a lot of bugs. Anyway, on the right hand, you can see a work by Dan Flavin that's also related to the work, I think, because he, in a physical world, with his light artworks, he also transcended the physical, I would say, in a way. And if you think about it, my material also is light in a way, because of on all the screens, in all the virtual reality glasses, at least at the moment, it's the light that you're seeing, like in Dan Flavin's work. And then another recent piece that I created on a sailboat residency. We sailed between Turkey and Greece, and it's a very problematic area. I mean, Turkey and Greece are in dispute, and it's also the location of the refugee crisis. And we were really between those two countries on the ocean, and we were wondering where's the border. You can see it on maps, but it's really nothing physical. And then the connection to augmented reality was quite clear. So we make ideas about the world, we geolocate them, and the impact is very big, but actually there's nothing. It's all, I don't know, made up in a way, but then very real. And my most recent work that I will drop on Tuesday is called Chance. It recreates the effect of a lava lamp a bit. So it's like a digital version of this 90s entertaining, in a way, lamps. And there's also a story behind it. So Cloudflare is a company that is the most important infrastructure company of the internet that you never heard of, according to Forbes. And they have 100 lava lamps in their office in San Francisco. And you might wonder why. And the reason is that they film those lava lamps and they use them to generate random numbers. So computers are always generating the same output when you give them an input. They are deterministic. So, of course, you can click on random, but in the background, it usually has some kind of seed or like an algorithm that is related to some outside source. But in themselves, computer can hardly generate random numbers. So this San Francisco companies uses the lava lamps for that. And I turn it on its head in a way. So you generate a token. There will be 125, and each of them is different, but they are also repetitive, and they create a lava lamp instead of using one for encryption. So, yeah, this is my last slide. I also shown some books that I find very inspiring. I don't know, follow me. Currently, Nature and State at Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, which I showed is still running. Then there's the exhibition in Berlin. And in October, I will be showing at Kunsthalle Zürich at the Do Your Own Research exhibition. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Oh. Hello? Hello? Oops. No, let's not have too much Coca-Cola here. Okay. Thank you for the talk.
Thank you very much.
Any questions from the audience about the Metaverse, Manuel's work, the future of art and technology. No questions? Do you want me to ask you another question?
Do it.
I mean, you've been around since like 10 years. In the beginning, and that's also how we met in 2017, you've done the extension building of NRW Forum Düsseldorf, and that was also for me the first time like really visiting a group show in VR. Then later I visited the group show you co-curated together with Nina Rös, and it was like really exciting, but I always had to be there. Mm-hmm. I needed to travel to Zurich, and it was way outside just to visit a virtual show, and then we've done our show together. The thing you said to me was like, I want to find a way to make my VR piece accessible for everyone. So, except of that, what else has changed for you as an artist over the past 10 years, especially when it comes to how people react to your work? I mean, you've been invited to the to Grand Palais and to Kunsthalle Baden-Baden. You're in the collection of Hamburger Kunsthalle. Do you think that has to do with NFTs, or just in general more with the acceptance of art and technology?
I think both at the same time. I think on the timeline you can see pretty well that also before NFTs there was rising interest, and I think it's still something new to work with technologies in the context of institutions that are very powerful and know all the art history and also own it. But dealing with technology, I mean, even for myself, it's hard to install things and to really get behind how it works and do it in an exhibition context. And so I think people are also learning, and a lot of them are also interested in learning, which is super cool. And on another level, of course, the hype around NFTs has also helped in the institutional context, I would say, because there's way more interest, and I think it's clear that there has to be something happening in this direction.
What I found very interesting, you've spoken about your sort of museum. I don't know. Yeah, it's sort of like a private museum / private collection, whatever. And when we launched it together, we really made it look like an institution, and people fall for it. Like they really thought he now thinks he as an artist can run an institution, which was basically the joke, because there's no museum or anyone taking care in Berlin of digital art, and we just wanted to show them, well, this is an issue. But what I then found really interesting, and usually when we work on projects, we always think about, well, how do we communicate it? What could go wrong? Might there be a shitstorm because of this and that? And it really happened for the first time that we didn't even think about that artists would complain that you, as the owner of the work, should not hang the work you own inside your own virtual gallery space. And then one artist that I found like really interesting, she was like, yeah, it would have been okay if you put it in a metaverse, like something like On Cyber, which is a company that has virtual gallery spaces, and it's like looks like really ugly, or some other brand stuff. And then she was like, yeah, but I don't want everyone, to just have their own metaverse thing. I was like, well, that's an interesting perspective, because because you are capable of building something that's way better than On Cyber, provides for everyone, artists say no. I don't like that. I don't know if that has even changed, but we'll see. But it's also that artist said, well, for the first time, someone made me think about what that I even actually need to think about what collectors are allowed to do with their work. And also I asked the museum director, Alfred Weidinger, he's here, to explain to me how it really works when a physical piece goes into a museum collection. Because also, if I understood correctly, if you own a work, you still have to ask the artist if you are allowed to present it, and so on and so on. But what if you own a digital piece, and so on and so on? So that was quite interesting. Have we found a solution on that in this space? No.
I don't think so. At the same time, what you're mentioning, there's this on cyber galleries, for example, and they just use
so ugly.
They use APIs in order to show the work, and technically I can also do this inside the app that I created, for example. So I don't know. There's not really a big difference, except of course, that I talk about it in a different way, maybe. I mean, it was announced as a presentation of my collection, but then I think it got so powerful because it's in this location and in this context, but which I also can do. I don't think there's really a solution to that yet.
But the interesting thing then also artists started complaining that they're not part of the show, that they're not in your collection. It's like not a thing. But that also shows me that the NFT space is not as big as it might seem, or there's not that many people, because otherwise why would you expect to be in every group show? And that's still also a thing when it comes to conferences. If some people are not invited, they complain, but like you can't be part of every single event in the traditional art world. That would be so funny. So I think, yeah, things will really change over the next years. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, we'll have a 10 minutes break, and then next up and Spalter, then artist talk with Mario Klingemann, and then a conversation with Lynn Hirschman-Leeson.